Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our student NATS chat for spring semester 2021. My name is Dr. Eric Hood. I'm at NYU Steinhardt. It's my pleasure to host these conversations a couple of times a year. We're modeled a little on the success of our NATS chats that we have available to us, but we at Student NATS Chat are aimed specifically at students and early career voice teachers, gearing our topics towards that, gearing our conversation to early career voice teachers. So thrilled to have all of you with us tonight, and we're really thrilled to have our guest, Dr. Shannon Coates. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
I'd love to just tell our guest a little more about you. You're a DMA from University of Toronto, where you currently teach pedagogy. We were chatting a little bit before we started tonight that we both teach an undergraduate focused pedagogy class at our institutions, and how exciting that is, and how rewarding the undergraduate pedagogy class is. So we've already been having a nice chat, everyone. So glad that you could join us. In addition to that, Shannon has a thriving private studio and a big focus on working with voice teachers and learn more about pedagogy, about the vocal process, about how to approach teaching. And you can learn more about that at www.shannon-coates.com. And something interesting that I was reminded of as I went back and did a little more research for our conversation was, Shannon, you had kind of a whole other career in the middle of this too, right? Which I think is awesome, because so many of the people who join us for these chats are often saying, oh, well, I'm coming to this a little later, or, oh, I don't have the experience, I'm new to teaching, and that somehow precludes them from being able to do this thing that we do, and it doesn't, and you're proof positive of that, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us. Everyone, I just want to go over a couple little things really quickly, and then we're going to get into our conversation. You can ask questions during our conversation today a couple of different ways. One, you can raise your hand, your little virtual hand on your dashboard, and I can unmute you, and you can ask your question to Shannon yourself, or you can put your question in the text box, the Q&A section, and then I will relay your question to Shannon during our chat tonight. We're also really excited, as I said, we are gearing our program towards early career teachers and current students. So if you have ideas about topics that you think really suit that group, please email them to me directly. You can shoot it to me. It's errik.hood@nyu.edu. You can reach me there. Please send along the topics, things you'd like to have covered. If you have ideas of guests we could bring in, we really want to hear from you and make this experience for you as beneficial as possible. So please reach out. Shannon, I was just telling you before we brought everyone in that even if none of our guests have questions, I have a million for you that I'm so excited to talk to you about, because this topic is hugely important, and that's teaching the very young voice, teaching children, teaching the child singer. And one of the reasons I think it's so important is pedagogy classes, when we're getting this hands-on experience, most often we're teaching our peer group, age-wise and experience-wise. And a lot of times, while we might delve into the topic of teaching young voices, we don't have a lot of hands-on experience. So learning from experts at this kind of slightly daunting prospect, I think, is hugely important. So excited to dig in this with you. The first question I'd ask is the question that, when this topic comes up in conversation, that I hear most often, which is, how young is too young for voice lessons?
Yes, and that is the question that is also, I mean, you'll still see it on the forums as well, right? So lots of folks saying, like, I had an inquiry for like 6 years old, but of course I wouldn't teach that young, or is it possible to teach this young? Or yeah, and you know, the mythology, or the old way, was that 13 is like the cutoff, right? And that's when I started taking voice lessons. Actually, was when I was 13, like way back in the day. And like 13 was like, once you've gone through puberty, then we can work with the voice, because we don't want to, you know, hurt the voice, and we want to be so careful about the teaching children to sing. What? So the short answer to that one for me is, if you're looking for a traditional style voice lesson, then you're likely, the youngest that I have taught is 6, so you're likely looking at the age 5, 6, just because you're looking at the age where a young child is also then going to school. They're starting to get some of that understanding of routine and understanding around like what it means to focus and learn things. But it's totally up to you. If you want to teach 5-year-olds, that's fantastic. You just need to understand what the appropriate expectations are and how to structure your lesson for a 5-year-old. For me, that's the main thing, is you just understand what those requirements are and what the appropriate expectations are. And if you don't love teaching like 8-year-olds, terrific. Own that and don't teach 8-year-olds. That's fantastic, right? Just like I said, just maybe stay away from the judgments of folks who do teach younger children, and you know, try not to pull out the old, but you're going to ruin their voice.
Right. Well, children have been singing for quite a long time, and people have been helping them do that for quite a long time.
For a very long time, yeah.
Well, you know, and something I think is interesting is if you're asking that question, how young is too young? How do I approach this? Then you're already being conscientious and thinking about the health of the singer, and these children are going to get voice lessons from someone. So conscientious people who want to do the research, who want to actually help this age group in a healthy way, that's the first step, is making that decision, I think. So
absolutely, yeah.
So one question that's already come in that kind of ties to what you said is, so when we teach this very young voice, we're not just teaching an adult voice lesson to a tiny person, right? But instead, how are children, how is a child voice student different from a post-pubescent student, a teenager or an adult, physiologically, but also the way they interact with you as a teacher?
So that's a big thing, and I'll kind of skim through and maybe see if there's anything we want to pull apart a little bit later. But so I'll skim through on the sort of the way that we structure lessons and the way that we're working with young children. A couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, we're keeping in mind attention span, and especially on Zoom, which actually for some young children, actually being on Zoom has actually been a very focusing experience, or being online has been actually being very focusing. For some young children, it has been the very opposite. It's been very not focusing, has not helped. So it really does depend on the child, but understanding what the attention span requirements, what the appropriate expectations are around attention span. And we sort of talk about age to minutes. So if you have a 5-year-old, you're at about 5 minutes attention span at a time, and that's basically the amount of time that a 5-year-old can stay focused in on a task at a time. 7, about 7 minutes, 8, around 8 minutes. So understanding that is one thing. Understanding what the things are that keep that child engaged, and ways to keep the child engaged is another thing. And keeping in mind all of the ways that we have at our disposal to make the learning really fun and really exciting and really engaging. So those things are for me, those are the sort of 3 things to keep in mind in terms of the difference with the relationship in the way that you structure a lesson, which really we're keeping those things in mind for everybody, but maybe a little bit more intentionally for a child, and also making sure we have that appropriate expectation. And then physiologically, I mean, there are a bunch of things physiologically, and I think we all know intuitively that we're not just teaching small humans, right? That's not really what's happening here. But we don't often, unless it's made explicit, we don't know what the actual differences are. And because we are adults, and because we are used to teaching, being in a situation where we are learning from another adult, and we're singing with other adults, and you know, like we don't necessarily make the observation and make that explicit observation in terms of the differences. So there are lots of resources out there, just by the way, in terms of making these differences very explicit. A great resource is actually Karen Brunson's book, The Evolving Voice. What was it called? The Evolving Voice? Evolving. I have it somewhere around here. Where is it?
I know, mine's on my bookshelf in my office, so I'd look it up.
The Evolving Singing Voice.
There we go.
That's a great resource in terms of the physiological differences, and she lays it out all the way from like baby all the way through to adult, through changing voice, through aging voice, etc. But I like to think about, just in general, I like to think about the three main systems in singing, the way that we kind of break down how we teach voice ped, right? We teach respiration, we teach phonation, we teach resonance, right? So we teach those kind of break things down into those three components. So when we think about children and the physiology of a child with those three components, the main differences then tell us what the appropriate expectations are and how we can teach to that. So if we're thinking about respiration, for example, we've got smaller lungs, obviously, we've got smaller ribs, but we also have a lot less stability in the torso. We've got a slightly different size shape in very young children, so we're not necessarily in this kind of shape. We're a little bit more in this kind of shape in the ribs. There's some, it's things aren't ossified to the same degree as we as we get older and as we become adults. So we're looking at a smaller capacity, of course, and we're also looking at that kind of slight instability in the body as a whole. The coordination isn't there. And so when we're asking for young children, for example, if we have an expectation that young children are going to be able to do perhaps a silent inhalation, or that we're going to see lots of expansion in the belly button, for example, those may be inappropriate expectations, right? And those are things that we think about teaching that are things that we're that we may not have that same like buoyancy and rib movement. We may not see that happening. We have not as much elasticity, and there's lots of different things happening there in the child physiology. So we just need to know that and adjust our expectations accordingly. So then we have songs with shorter phrases, for example. We don't expect as long, an extension of the breath exhalation, for example. And then we're going to ask for some of the coordinations. We're going to expect some of the coordination that we would see in an older singer, but we may not actually see that all the time. And we may not see it consistently, and that's fine. That's totally fine. We're just going to teach to it and expect it to start to coordinate eventually, but may not coordinate until they go through puberty, or even 10 or 11.
Sure.
That's one example. I don't know. Do we want to do a few more? Or do you want to?
Oh no, I think I'm sure we'll touch on more specific examples as we go. But that's a wonderful broad overview. We have another question coming in here. This person says, this is Marie, who says, when teaching children, would adding physical elements make the warm-up more fun and effective? Moving hands in circles, walking around, etc. So involving the body more, so it feels more like play.
Yeah, absolutely. I love. Lots of play, lots of, obviously when we're in person, I have lots of big bags of toys. I have lots of toys. Hoverman Sphere is very fun, and that's great for adults too. It's not like it's not great for everyone. Lots of toys. I'm just realizing that I probably should have had my toy bag over here. It's right over there. Balls and things that you can do fun stuff with your hands. Lots of, I've fabric in the studio. I have different ways to write and draw and create different kinds of pictures, and we can do this on Zoom now too, but like make some kind of like warm-up exercise that you get to follow the line with, and the Full Voice has a whole bunch of those actually already printed that you can that you can just download. Super fun, different colors and different shapes of sort of breath lines that you can follow. Or now we're going to do a Z sound with this whatever shape you make, and now you're going to draw one for me, and we're going to do, and then we get to do breath, and then we're going to move our body along with it. Yeah, any kind of movement in the body.
It really sounds like the more I hear you talk, that so much of the work with the really young singer is discovery, whereas I think with the adult singer we're really working at trying to solidify and to refine and to maybe automate in some circumstances. But here it seems like we're really after discovery, finding these things.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, knowing that discovery is the goal, can you talk a little bit about the feedback you give to young students? We're probably not structuring our feedback the same way we do with adult students as well.
That's a great question. So in all of my teaching, and when I'm working with teachers, I'm always being as mindful as possible about encouraging growth mindset through the language, and constantly rather than "you did a good job" or "you're so talented" or "that was really great," which is all fine. Structuring the feedback in such a way that we're pointing out specific things that are that they've worked hard at doing and that they've accomplished, right? So I love the way that you worked so hard to get that rhythm, or I love the way that you worked so hard. So we're not necessarily providing as specific feedback with children, right? It's not as, like, wow, I don't know, whatever, you really kept the pharynx open that whole time, or whatever, your tongue was really fronted. Like, we're not doing that, obviously, but something that you can say is, like, your owl sound was really fantastic, and I love the way you moved your lips. Let's look in the mirror and just see how well you moved your lips to get that ooh owl sound going. So yeah, like specific things like that, but obviously geared toward the child.
Yeah. But what I love about your saying is, and you hear your reference to like our growth mindset, and like those watching, if you haven't read Mindset by Carol Dweck, please check that out. It's incredible work. But I love that you're talking about doing something that I think we all could probably do more of when we're working with adults, which is praising the effort rather than teaching them to seek the praise, right? We don't want to praise the outcome. We want to congratulate the effort, so that so it's
and I think this is an important thing for us as teachers, especially when we're teaching young children. I think it's so important because parents don't always recognize that, because parents will say, oh, my kid's been singing since they were 2 years old. Like like they came out of the womb singing, and I think they're so talented, and, they just love it. And like, I love to hear them sing, and that's fantastic. And I love that, except that we're not just educating the child, we're educating parents at the same time, right? This is the great pleasure of being an independent teacher, especially, is that we're not just working with, we're working with a whole system there. So the education is not just for the child. So when we're working with parents, same thing. We're talking about, wow, they put in so much work this week. I can see the results of their effort here, and starting to really turn the parents' mindset around as well at the same time, so that they're also then working with their child. And that's another thing, actually. I'll come back to that in a minute. They're also then working with their child in that way at home. So they're not requiring the child to do, like, you've got to do that scale 3 times. Or you've got to get this thing perfect, or it has to sound this way. They're working with the child at home and encouraging them to try again, because it's super interesting. Let's try that one again. So that's one of the other things, I think, actually, when you're deciding how young is too young, when you're making decisions around which students you would like to bring into the studio and work with, part of the calculation, I think, around whether a child is too young or not is how invested is the parent in a positive way, right? We want and how willing are you to work with that parent? That is part of the thing too, that when we're bringing a 6-year-old into the studio, that's potential for them to be there for another decade.
Sure.
At least, right? So you're really committing. I mean, in some ways it's fantastic because that's a really nice steady income, right?
Sure.
And a teacher, that's fantastic. I like to see that coming into the studio. But on the other hand, you want to be careful who you are committing to. If you want parents who are super who are working with their children, especially young children, to help them practice well. And
Yes.
you want to be really conscious about the kinds of parents who are perhaps a little overbearing or perhaps a little too engaged, or perhaps are relying on you solely to be the motivator. So if you are the sole motivator for that 6-year-old, it's not going to be terrific.
Right. And it really does sound like we're teaching the parents also to find the practice the most rewarding part, not the outcome. We don't want the parents focused on do they sound like X, Y, or Z, but instead how much work, how much enjoyment are they getting from the process and investing in that, right?
Exactly.
I think we'll probably have more questions about interactions with parents as we go, because that is a whole thing also. But we're getting some incredible questions coming in, which I'm a little jealous of because I have my own whole list I want to ask, but I want to get to our guests first. So kind of we're talking about the methodology a little bit in our interactions and the type of feedback we give. Theodora, forgive me if I mispronounced your name, is asking, would you suggest to stay away from explanations of sensation with respiration and more allowing the child to sing and notice things in their own body? And that's especially in online teaching when you're not present to monitor completely.
Yeah, I absolutely. And so my favorite way to talk about this is to talk about, let's have the child do the thing and then let's observe what's happening in the body and create the directive from what we're observing, rather than giving the child the directive and rather than saying to do the thing. And I think this across the board for all of us, and this isn't just for children, but it's even more, I think, it's wonderful to be able to impart this gift to students where they are able to take control of their own learning, where they're able to be empowered to do their own learning and to do their own discovery. So so that's part of the process, and something I think that is really terrific about teaching online, that we don't have the same ability to direct and to tell what to do. We just don't. So there's so much more opportunity for singers of all ages, of course, but we're talking about young singers, but for young singers to develop this, it really is a skill of learning, right? To develop that through the way that we're working with the singer. I love, especially with children, I mean, I do this with adult singers, and I encourage teachers to do this as well, and have recently been doing a lot of fun stuff with Heidi Moss, who, shout out, I love you, Heidi, about mimicry. And this is something that I've been, that has been part of my practice for a while, but now, looking at some of the science is really fun. Oh, that's why that works. Interesting. Okay. But this works particularly well with children where, I'm asking you to create a sound. Well, I'm gonna just show you the sound and then you get to do the sound. We're just gonna play back and forth with that. And then I'm gonna say, so what did that feel like to you? And young children, if you keep your questions open or slightly directed, only slightly directed, rather than saying, did you feel something change in your larynx? Or did you feel, blah, blah, blah. If you keep it slightly open, or you say, did anything change in this area? Did you feel something change down here? Can you show me with your hands what that felt like? Can you tell me a color that felt like? Like you will get the craziest, most beautiful answers from children, especially. And again, it develops their own deeper learning, right? And it gives them the skills to learn. Yeah.
And again, things we're talking about that we would probably be talking about regardless of age group, because those are such great principles in mind, but definitely especially important for children. And what I love about that is one of the skills I'm trying to teach early on with my students is just establishing that vocabulary to describe the sensation. And so if you can build that in that early in the process, it's just going to, smooth sailing from there. That's fantastic. So we have, oh my gosh, so much good stuff. Okay, let me see. Let's see. So Abigail asks, when you're bringing in that young student, you're just starting to develop this rapport and your dynamic. What do you do if you have a young student who's having trouble even matching pitch? How do we start with that young student?
Yeah, so I love that. So I will say before I get to that one, I will say as well, if you are unsure about working with young singers, something that I would love for you to consider is to consider doing a 6-week trial. And I don't mean free lessons. I mean, it's a 6-week package where we both work together and you word it like, I'm figuring out whether you're a great fit for my studio and you get to figure out whether I'm the right teacher for you. Like this is both ways, just so that you get the opportunity to decide whether this is a student you want to work with or not. And there's no shame in saying, you know what, I can't handle this 6-year-old. Totally fine. And aren't you glad you learned that in that 6-week trial? then 6 weeks in and you're thinking, okay, I've got to go all the way to June with this kid? No. So
and it's already established, so we don't have to worry about hurt feelings or surprises. We've already established that this is something that we're going to evaluate, which I think is so smart.
Exactly. And you're very clear as well. If I feel like this isn't a great fit or we're not a great fit for each other, I'm going to send you to one of my wonderful colleagues who I'm sure will be very happy to have you in their studio, blah, blah, blah. Like anyway. So then if you do come across someone who you feel like, okay, very challenging for me, and I'm not sure I have the emotional resources or the resources period to be able to work with this singer, totally fine. You don't have to suffer. And they don't have to suffer, right? They get to go to someone who wants to work with them. So singers who have challenges matching pitch.
I'm so sorry, do you mind if I just wanted one thing I thought of, because one point that you made that I love is also when you're building your studio and you're trying to build a studio, bring in studio members, trying to force a fit with a student that doesn't feel great, that's not going to help build your studio. Likely they're going to get frustrated and leave at some point, and they're not going to have as nice things to say about you. But if you refer out,
yes,
and then these people are like, it wasn't a great fit for me, but she was so honest and she helped set us up with someone else, and you should try her out. And suddenly the student you weren't feeling a great dynamic with is leading to you building your studio rather than the opposite. So I just wanted to seize on that thing that you said, because I think it's really great advice. Yeah. So sorry, the meat of the question, which was, I know, so many exciting things. When a young student's having trouble matching pitch.
So young students having trouble matching pitch, this is not abnormal, right? It's quite normal. There are so many things growing and changing, and there's so much instability in even the folds themselves are so unstable, and all the cartilages are kind of soft, and all the structure that actually holds our folds and keeps the folds able to resist that air pressure. Everybody's a little bit soft in there, like nobody's, we're waiting to get ossified, or to get a little harder and to be a little bit better, something to resist there. So there is a lot of instability in the instrument itself, and in some cases we've just got an instability in the feedback loop, right? We've just got like, okay, I don't really know what I'm hearing, and I can't quite compare that to what I need to do to change this. So it's quite normal. Normal might be the wrong word, but it's typical. There are lots of young kids who do not sing in tune. So the main thing is I feel that if you're asking this question, you're already thinking it yourself. Like, how do I help this student, right? And the main thing is to not say, wow, you can't sing. And I know nobody watching this would say that. However, we all know someone who was told that they weren't allowed to open their mouth, or they had to just mouth it from the back row, or who have had some kind of trauma around somebody saying that to them as a child. So
in elementary school, I was told just because you can't sing well doesn't mean you have to sing loudly.
oh my gosh,
Which
yeah.
I built my whole career proving them wrong.
So it was actually a good thing for you. So yeah, go ahead and say that.
Exactly.
Oh, don't say it. Don't say it. But this is very damaging for someone to hear, or can be very damaging for someone to hear. So, I mean, obviously that's the first thing. So some language around that. After you've decided, yes, this is a singer I want to work with. If you decide that it isn't, that's totally fine. But yes, this is a singer I want to work with, and I want to learn and grow. And I really want to help this singer. Then the language that you're going to use around there is tons and tons of play. And you're going to find the games. First of all, you're going to find a pitch in the speech range that they can match. They will be able to find a pitch in the speech range. It may only be like 2 pitches that they can actually match, and you're just going to build from there with games, lip trills, bubbles in water, like straws in water, animal sounds, Santa Claus, bunny rabbits, like whatever kinds of sounds and fun stuff you can find to do, starting at that pitch and moving up and down and moving around through that pitch. Also finding that pitch in their bodies can be very useful. Where do you feel that pitch? Great. Can you move the pitch up with your hand? So if you feel that pitch, I feel the pitch here. Good. So now let's move the hand up and see what happens with the pitch. Let's go up and just see what happens. So it all becomes this, again, exploratory. It becomes, it's fun and exciting, and there's nothing wrong.
Right.
We're going to get there. There's nothing wrong.
And what I love is everything you say really lends itself to creating a safe environment to try, right? Mm-hmm. And again, something we could do with our adult students too, but creating a safe environment where where children feel safe to make strange noises and not worry about if it sounds good or not. We're not judging the sound, which I just love. Thank you. That's really helpful. We have Carolyn has a kind of a 2-part question. First is, and we talked a little bit about this when we were preparing for our discussion tonight. What is it about one-on-one voice lessons that we can give to students as opposed to like a group lesson or just doing piano? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll preface that. I'll preface my response just by saying that we've really moved away as a culture from group singing experience. Like I'm saying this as a North American and as a white person in North America, just sort of saying this as in a big general sense. We have moved away from singing in church choirs or singing in church at all, even if you weren't in the choir, going to church, we moved away from that quite a bit. And we don't have singing in schools in the same way that we used to, My children who are teenagers now in public school, if they wanted to be in the choir at the school, they had to give up recess. Well, they're not doing that. That was, that's the only way that choir happened is on, lunch hour or whatever. So it wasn't built into the system the same way as for me, where when I was in school a million years ago, the whole school sang in choir, the entire school. Like we went to gym and we practiced like as a whole school. So, or to the gym and so we've really moved away from that culture of group singing, not necessarily from group lessons, but group singing, and from the ability to be able to find a local choir, even for parents who, who would like to get their kid involved, but not necessarily involved in voice lessons. Like there aren't even really choirs, local choirs anymore, right? Kids choirs, there isn't that local piano teacher who had the kid choir on the side or the children choir on the side, right? Or on the side. So we've moved away from that as a culture, and we've also really moved toward individualization as a culture as well, right? So because of our fascination with talent shows and all that stuff, which isn't necessary. I mean, it is what it is, right? It's where we are. So now parents see, and children see, 8-year-olds winning contests by singing O mio babbino caro. Okay. And so then we, parents and children alike, are like, well, I guess this is how we do the thing now. So, and we don't have the same, like singing lessons, no child prodigy has won like a talent show by playing piano, as far as I know, right? Like, I don't think. So, and no choirs have won any talent shows, as far as I know. I don't know, I could be wrong on that, but I haven't seen any, and especially not any, Western classical singing choirs. So that has really, that's a big shift that's happened in the culture. So what are we offering in our one-on-one lessons? We're offering, and versus group lessons, and I will say too that Nikki Loney at The Full Voice has some wonderful group lesson ideas and ways to run group lessons. But group lessons can be a fantastic way to get young singers singing. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, like young singers. Group lessons could be fantastic, but again, you need to decide. I hate doing group lessons for young children. I hate it.
Yeah.
So I know that for me. I know that. I love teaching young kids. Like, I love teaching 6-year-olds. I have no problem. But group lessons is not my favorite thing. And I love, like, I do cohorts teaching, with adults. I love it. It's no problem. 6-year-olds, and that's fine. It's fine. Lots of people do, and it can be a fantastic way to offer, especially parents who maybe aren't sure that their kid really does want to do this thing, or maybe you've got a super shy kid who you want to have the experience. That's part of the thing too, is we used to be able to send a kid to choir and then they'd make some friends. Right? Find some friends. Now we don't have choirs. And the other thing that we've moved toward is the local theater groups. So kids are going into music theater, which is wonderful. I have zero issues with that. But the music theater, it doesn't, again, that lends itself more to a solo within a group rather than a group singing experience, right? So so the groups can be a wonderful way to offer a sort of intro to singing, as well as to free up your schedule a little bit. If you're packed, you can get a whole chunk of folks into a group schedule, into a group session, and be really efficient with your time and their time, right? And offer them something that is going to be a little gateway for them to work into one-on-one sessions if you want to. I think the magic in one-on-one sessions, and this has always been true for me anyway, I think the magic in one-on-one sessions is how individual we can make that work. We can make the learning so geared to that singer, and the singer never has to, we're not in an academic program where we have to get the singer to a certain level to sing a recital or to sing a jury, or to, you don't have to learn a certain amount of rep at a certain amount of time. We don't have those constraints in the independent studio. So we're really able to teach to the student and really able to teach that person in front of us holistically. So that, for me, that is the magic of one-on-one. But as I said, group lessons also beautiful and can be magical as well.
For sure. And it seems like a lot of it is what the priorities are for the student, right? If they're interested more in music theater, or if they're interested in developing some styles in pop or do that whole thing, then. But if like by disposition or financial circumstances, a group environment might be better. So there's a place for both, it seems to me, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's so smart what you say is, teach what you feel comfortable teaching, both what you feel capable to do and also what you love to do, because we don't want to no student deserves us dreading, looking forward to their hour, right? We don't want that. So that's more the face I expect from the student when they walk in with me. We don't want to
Exactly.
So we got a couple of groups of questions that all kind of hover around a particular topic. So the first one, just circling back to parents, and one is when we have overbearing parents, parents who want to kind of take control over your work, how do we deal with that? And then tangentially related, maybe do we always or never or sometimes want the parents in the lessons with us?
Great question. Let me start with the second one first. It really depends on the parent and the student relationship and their relationship to each other, and it really depends. I've had parents in sitting in lessons and with like 16-year-olds and zero problem at all. Parent sits there, does their work, every once in a while looks up and says, "Oh, I really like that," and not, like, or little tears come down as they listen to something beautiful happening. I mean, really, that and wonderful, and the student has no problem at all with having a parent in the room. So that's a relationship thing with the parent, and also the parent really not trying to not coming in on my territory at all. So it's great. And then I've also had parents that I personally don't care whether the parent's in the room or not, unless that is detrimental for the singer. So I've had parents where I've just said, yeah, no, you're not welcome in the lesson. And I thank you so much. And this is going to go so much better. And it is going so much better when the student and I are able to be alone. And I've had parents not sit in on like 5-6-year-old lessons, and I've had parents who sit in every time. The parents who are sitting in the lesson with young children, especially, who are sitting in the lesson and who they might be taking a note, and they might be, and they'll say, "Oh, do you mind just recording that so I can make sure she figures it out afterwards?" Yes, please. Every 24/7 you can be in the lesson, because they're so engaged and they're really just working to do what they can for their child. And then again, on the other side of that spectrum, the parent who is overbearing and who will literally cut you off, and I'm literally in the back of my head, I'm like, "Raise your hand if you're the doctor." "Oh wait, that's me. Hi, I have a doctorate in this." "Hold on, look, it's me." Or, "Raise your hand if you're the voice teacher." "Yep, oh wait, that's me. I'm the expert, so sit back." So I've had both of those parents in the room, and with the parent that where you can kind of feel like they do not believe you, or they don't feel like you have the authority in the room, or they feel like they know their kid better, which in some ways they do, absolutely, there's no question there. On the other hand, they don't know this subject. They do not know this subject. Yeah. So you've got to sort of, you'll know it when you come across it. You'll know it when it's not working. You will know that, and so then you can either have a script ready, something that you already know to say, something like, I have done the age thing. 10-year-olds in my studio, the parents of 10-year-olds don't sit in.
Yeah.
Done and done. Or in my studio, the parents come in every 6 weeks. We have a show-off lesson every 6 weeks, or we have or whatever, every month, or every however long you want to make it. So just be prepared. You will know when it's not right. You will know. And then the question before was,
I think we've kind of touched on both as far as having the overbearing parents and also in the lesson. So we had a quick follow-up on that. Is any advice, especially our younger people who are watching, who maybe don't feel as confident or self-assured to have that conversation with the parent? Do you have any? So I like what you said when you related to the age group, or you relate. I think refer to a policy is probably wise, right?
Go policy, absolutely. So you can even say, I mean, it doesn't have to be a policy that you've had forever. It could be a policy you made up right now to deal with this one issue that just came up now. So you can have a policy that says after 6 lessons, the parents don't come in. Or after, you know, what, like you can make it anything you want. By the 2nd of January, no parents are in the lessons. Your policy, you can make it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any concerns though about sharing a room one-on-one with a young child as far as those concerns about being worried about abuse or accusations like that? When we're asking the parents not to be there, or for whatever reason the parent isn't, it's easier for them to drop off and pick up. How do we kind of deal with that?
That is such a good question, and such a I mean, that is a concern, certainly. So there are lots, I mean, when we're online, we're staying out of kids' bedrooms, hopefully, if at all possible, we're staying out of kids' bedrooms. I know that isn't possible at all most of the time, or some of the time, but if possible. So when we're in person, yeah, my home studio has a huge set of windows that goes out to the front. And often in the summertime, parents will sit right in front there. I also have the option to record the whole lesson, and I will say to parents, like, here's the recording, or I am recording, especially, I mean, this is a thing, certainly, but especially if you are a cis male, or, I mean, this is, it is a way that you need to protect yourself, certainly, and to think about, consider protecting yourself and the student, frankly, but both ways.
Yeah, but all teachers, I think, and I think you're right, you know, male identifying teachers, especially, something to really bear in mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I too, one of the things I've loved about, you know, I think we all can find things to talk about that are suboptimal about this virtual teaching world that many of us are living in right now. But one good thing is that I have a video record of every single one of my lessons. So it's not only feels safe, but also, whereas before most of my students would audio record their lessons, they'd hear the difference, you know, timbrally, or they'd hear a resonance shift, but now they're seeing the shapes. So I think one of the big things I'm going to work for is, when I go back to in-person instruction, setting up a manner through which I can just video record and upload to the cloud all of my lessons, and that just feels safer that way. And probably we all have the necessary equipment to do that because of this virtual world we've been living in. So that's one way I'd suggest protecting ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a particular concern as well for independent teachers who are teaching out of our homes, right? Like this is a particular concern. So it's not nothing, and definitely consider recording lessons, or saying that you have an open door policy. That may also be something to consider, where the parents are welcome to come in at one time during the lesson, or any time during the lesson, or, you know, like, you're welcome to sneak in, and, you know, or have an observation space.
Sure. Yeah. Or I guess, yeah, we could we could FaceTime them and put them on mute so they can't interrupt you. Yeah, there's probably all kinds of ways this is one way I think we can lean into the gifts we've been given from remote teaching, right? So we've got 3 questions that kind of revolve around a similar topic that I think would be a great one for us to maybe wrap up our time together with. And that is, when you're selecting repertoire for these students, we've got one. I'm going to kind of run you through the small parts of the questions, but generally I think picking repertoire, what's a reasonable expectation for this? Someone asked, what are your 3 favorite anthologies for repertoire for children? But generally, what can we expect from children, their ability to sing music? How do we pick their repertoire? Could you talk a little bit about that?
So if you're, first of all, a couple of resources. Nikki Loney's again, Nikki Loney at the Full Voice, and Mim Adams, of course. Just like so many resources there, and so many wonderful songs that she's teamed with a wonderful Canadian composer, Don Rodenizer, who just writes the most incredible music for children and for developing voices. And it's fun and catchy, and you learn something, and they all have pedagogical intent behind them, so you're going to learn a thing. It's fantastic. Yeah, so that's a great resource. The other resource that if you are if you're interested in finding music for young singers that isn't necessarily, that is a little less contemporary or music theater oriented, the Royal Conservatory of Music's syllabus has graded repertoire choices, and it's online. You can just Google it. You know, they have songs at the intro level, and that's your sort of great age 5, 6, 7-ish, and then level 1 is your sort of 7, 8 age. So that's all graded, and so that gives you a really nice sense of like whether this is appropriate or not for children. And then so one of the things that I encourage the teachers that I work with to consider is, when we're looking at contemporary repertoire, when we're looking at music theater repertoire especially, was this written for the child voice? First of all, just was it written for the child voice? So if it was written for the child voice, so because we run into these issues, right, where we've got a precocious 7-year-old, I'm not going to give them, you know, like, I don't know, some like super easy song because they can memorize all of the words, all of, like but I can't give them something that's written, you know, I'm not going to give them Lieder either, right? Obviously. So even though they could memorize all those words, but it's not written for a 7-year-old to sing. So that's where you start to look for the Matilda rep, or you start to look for the rep that in the music theater world or the contemporary world that is written for the child voice specifically. And then you can start to see what stuff is going to work for that child within that rep. And we're living in a beautiful time right now where there is a ton of wonderful contemporary music theater rep for kids and teens, frankly. Like, it's just, it's a wealth of repertoire, not just stuff that we sort of like, oh, you know, I don't know, Do a Deer or whatever. It's not just that, right? Like, we've got really contemporary, terrific repertoire for kids. So there are a bunch of music theater, you know, compilations, texts out there. You know, you can look and find the music theater ones. But again, my sort of rule of thumb on that one is we're looking for the rep that was actually written for the child voice. That's what we're looking for. Yeah.
So I'm gonna put in the chat the Royal Conservatory of Music, and it's their we want the intro level for 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, if you take a look at the syllabus online, the Royal Conservatory of Music's syllabus, they have repertoire listed like intro level, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And then they also have technical exercises that are appropriate to each of those levels, as well as ear training that's appropriate to each of those levels. So it's a graduated way to just, you know, keep building. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And what I love about that is I think we can also use that as a jumping off point, right? Yeah. So we see what songs and exercises are on there, and then we can start to think creatively about the specific student we have. Can they handle a little more complicated? Could they handle? Do they need something a little simpler? So I think that's great. And it's so great to have the resources there. Speaking of resources, before we wrap up, you've got a workshop coming up, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so if you want to go a little bit deeper into the anatomy and physiology part of things and then appropriate expectations, I'm doing a class, in about 10 days. So you can take a look at my website and find that. And then I'm also doing, and that's just like a 90-minute lecture, like here's all the information, download the kind of lecture. And then I'm also doing a 2-week pop-up course, which will be an intensive and where we do lives through the week, and we have 24/7 Marco Polos going, and it's a small group of voice teachers where we're interacting the whole time, and specifically to child voices. So exercises, resources, and some group discussions. And one of the group discussions will be with Nikki Loney. So Q&A with Nikki. So yeah, so that's also the information about that is also on my website. So
fantastic. And what I love about that is, I encourage everyone to check out your workshops and your programs, but I think one of the big things to take away from that is that even though working with young voices can feel daunting, lean on your colleagues, lean on the expertise of those who are doing this already. We're all in this together. We all want our students to sing well and to learn and to be healthy. And there's no need to be territorial about it. We're all working together. So resources like your programs out there, this doesn't have to be a big, scary, daunting thing.
I mean, the other one as well, I'll just throw out there as well, is Dr. Ginevra Williams's work as well, and she's over in the UK, but she has a lot of wonderful resources and possibly courses as well. I'm not sure if she has some courses or some classes online as well, but she has beautiful resources as well.
So those of you who are watching live, and also those of you who are watching archived video, I'll see if we can get some of these links and some of these names and programs put in the text that goes along with our video. So if you're watching this live and you didn't catch some of those names, some of those programs, come back, check out the archive chat, because I'm sure you'll hear something brilliant Shannon said that you didn't want to miss, but also you can go and see in writing some of these names and programs we're discussing. So we'll get that written down so that's accessible for everyone watching. We're still getting questions coming in, but I think we're running short on time. So Shannon, where can people, will you remind us one more time, where can they find you if they have more questions, they want to learn more about what you do?
Well, Shannon-Coates.com is the website, and I'm pretty active on the socials. So if you, mostly on Instagram, VoicePed, @VoicePed is where I am on Instagram, and then on Facebook I'm at The Vocal Instrument 101 or Dr. Shannon Coates, Voice and the Art of Teaching. It's very fancy.
I love it. And when you're ready to retire, I bet you could auction off @VoicePed for a pretty penny. So you grab that handle while you could. I love that. Well, I want to thank you one more time, Shannon, for being with us this evening. So much incredible information and presented in such a fun and clear way. So very, very grateful. To those of you who are watching live, giving up part of your evening, where I know we have Zoom fatigue, we know we have screen fatigue, and so the fact that you're here to develop as teachers and to learn from experts like Shannon, just kudos to you, congrats, keep doing that. This is how we learn, this is how we serve our students better, all of us. So thank you very much to those of you who are here tonight and watching after the fact. So thanks again, Shannon. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Take care. Thank you very much.